Hey, what's going on? Welcome to AngularAir. I'm your host, Justin Schwarzenberger, and today's episode is entitled Beyond the Lab Air Edition, Making User Data Work for You. So we're interested to find out what that means and see what we're going to talk about. Before we meet our guests, let's say hi to our panelists. Joining us today, we've got the NG Panda, Austin McDaniel. Austin, what's going on?
How's it going, everyone? I'm sitting outside and they literally are dragging trash cans across the road on their bottom. So sorry if it's a little loud.
Awesome. Hey, real world, right? Real world. All right. And joining us, we have our effervescent beacon of light, Alyssa Nichol. Alyssa, what's going on?
Hey, glad to be here, everyone. No trash dragging here, but I'll try to keep it lively.
Nice. And our guest today, I believe it's his first time on AngularAir, Leonardo Zizzamia. How's it going?
Very well, thank you. Yes, it's the first time in AngularAir, and pretty excited about it. Thank you for having me.
Yes, we're very excited to have you, and welcome for your time. Glad to have it. Why don't you give our viewers a little bit of background on yourself and what's going on in case they don't know.
So, where should I start? Okay, I was born many years ago. Now, I'm one of the senior engineer here at Coinbase in San Francisco, and the community here in San Francisco mostly knows me because I'm one of the co-organizers of the Angular San Francisco meetup, and recently I also joined the GDE program as a Web and Angular GDE. Side note, I also recently start organizing the future for the first international conference in Italy. So actually, it's the first time we say that live, or we say that just in public. It's going to happen an Italian conference in Rome in October 2019, and the folks in Italy, they asked me to help organize it to make it more international because I know a little bit of English. And I was working in the past to several other companies like Twitter in San Francisco, or Framestore in London, and I've been using Angular from over, I lost the count, 5-6 years, from 1 point something. And I always every time I did open source, my focus was always being like performance and measuring performance, or how to make your website faster and lighter. So that's something that I always had kind of like, I would say I nerd out on that topic.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, we had an episode recently where we were talking about performance and your name came up and we were talking about Perfume.js. And I think Bonnie was saying, hey, we need to get him on the show. And so here you are. Very cool. Very cool. All right. What do you got in store for us today?
So I want to kind of like give a brief understanding to everyone what measuring performance is. And a clear distinction is, first of all, understanding what is a lab data and a field data. When people, there are a few buzzwords that kind of like come around, and I want to give clarify some of those. First of all, like most of people heard about like the DevTools and Lighthouse, and that it was a great success from the Chrome team to slowly introducing Lighthouse as kind of like experiment, and finally becoming kind of like the tool that everyone kind of like use it to measuring performance. And people need to always remember that when we talk about Lighthouse, we're talking about lab data. We talk about every data that you can collect on your own laptop, or maybe on your own kind of like staging environment, and measuring the same metrics over and over and over to the same CPU, the same latency, the same machine. So you kind of have a baseline and say, okay, this website, this application, this is the type of like metrics we have. Field data is completes the lab data. So when this kind of like metrics, they don't replace each other, they just complete. Like you do the lab data to make sure that when you deploy, you are deploying a code that is the best that you've written, and it's very well performant. But when you deploy it, we know that bugs can come out. There are different devices, different bandwidth, latency, things that can happen to that you didn't predict. And that's where the field data are related to. The field data, the more sophisticated word is RAM, real user metrics. And this is just a collection of metrics that are focused to calibrate how really fast is your website in everywhere. Google Analytics tried to do some measurement in the past, but never got really accurate. Google also with the Google Index BigQuery is trying to do something similar to, but still, it's just like a small spectrum of it's more like an average amount of this kind of like metrics. When we talk about like these metrics, we have also remembered that the people behind that are actually in creating these metrics are the web standard committee. And in this committee, there are people from Microsoft, from Google, from most of the biggest company, and they're working to create like open source, like public standard that every company can follow through. And the reason is because we don't want to just like, we want to have a clarity of what metrics we should look to understand actually our application is fast or not. And it's important, like last year, for example, we talk, many people heard this buzzword, time to interactive, TTI. And people are like, okay, so if I get like lower my TTI, that means I'm going better, I'm going faster. Yes, but at the same time, the committee, it keeps studying how these metrics are really useful or not. And the TTI, people always thought like, okay, this is the value that we have to measure in a real world. They said this in 2017. In 2018, people realized, no, that actually is very hard to calculate, and there is a lot of like false positive or false negative. So they move it back to the lab data. So what are these metrics? The metrics, there are many, but today I want everyone to focus on just a few of them. For the field data, so for the data that you calculate on Lighthouse, you have to focus on first paint, time to interactive, and pretty much like these are the two that most of the people should actually focus at first. First paint can be easily confused with the first contentful paint. First paint is when you open a website and the background change. And as soon as the background change, that is the first paint. The first contentful paint instead is when there is the first content loaded. So anything, any like.
So you're not counting the background as content. You're just counting.
Yeah, the background doesn't count as a content. So if you change the CSS background, that is still first paint. But as soon an SVG, an H1, any type of content, it's been loaded, that's when triggers the first contentful paint. Most of the time, first paint and first contentful paint are exactly at the same time. But sometimes people change like first the background to kind of like, hey, we are here. And then after it's load the content. But yeah, it's important like understand that you have to keep the first contentful paint as low as possible, because that's the moment that someone actually is waiting on the phone, is on the subway, and as soon as kind of like you see the first content, you're like, okay, something is happening.
So you're saying you want to get to that as fast as possible.
Yes.
Okay.
And there is another buzzword that has been around that is first meaningful paint. First meaningful paint is usually when, okay, you're loading some content, but the main content is not loaded yet. So I think I want to calculate that. The problem is first meaningful paint, because it's very depends from each website. It needs to be it can't kind of like the metrics people to create these metrics was really hard to kind of like understand when is the moment that if something is meaningful for you. So they kind of said, okay, for the first meaningful paint, you can still calculate, but you had to kind of like write your own version. If you want something that is a standard across all the website, first contentful paint is the kind of like a good one. So first contentful paint and TTI are probably the best solution for lab data. What does it mean, TTI? TTI is the you load the content, and we know that sometimes single page app, they take a lot of time to boot like stores, to boot all your data. So you might actually see the content, but you can still really do anything with it. So that extra lag or junk, that is the TTI. That's how much time someone needs to wait before actually the website is fully useful. And to calculate TTI, Lighthouse is perfect to doing that, because what actually means is if the website loads after 1 second, but you still have like stuff in your thread for over other 2 seconds, that means on second 3, that is the TTI. And Lighthouse will do all the calculation to figure out what's exactly your TTI. And this is for lab data. So lab data, first contentful paint, a TTI. For real user measurement, so for field data, then we have to focus to, again, to first contentful paint. And the difference for the second metric is, instead of TTI that people should not use anymore for the field, focus to first input delay. So first input delay, what's the difference? First input delay is, because we realized that calculated TTI in your website can take a kind of like some energy, or kind of like it's not quite accurate, because things can happen. First input delay, also feed, it's kind of like the easiest way to figure out if your website is responsive as soon the website is open. So the website is open, and as soon you click it, how much millisecond you need to wait to actually have a response. Everything that is lower than 100 milliseconds, it's a good result. If you start calculating first input delay now on your website, it takes more than 300 milliseconds. 300 milliseconds, they don't seem much, but actually it's already an amount of latency that can be perceived as the website is not ready yet, is slow. So to recap, to kind of like finish this preface, lab data with Lighthouse, first contentful paint, and TTI. For RAM, real user metrics, with first contentful paint, again, the difference this time we are calculating this metric across all our devices, and see is like, okay, with Chrome is super fast, but with this cheap phone, with Android, with a bad latency, is terrible. And we have to improve it. And the second one is first input delay. So, question? I put a lot on the table, sorry.
Yeah. I'm getting some echo. Maybe it needs to mute, or Leonardo. Yeah. Okay. So the lab data, is that really where we're looking to measure performance of how users perceive that our applications are actually doing something, or going to be like they're in the process of booting up, essentially, right? To give them that feedback that hey, you navigated to our application and something is happening. We're doing stuff. We're not just stalling out. So it kind of covers that part. And then the other part, the field data is really, okay, how soon can they start doing something with it?
It's more about, you should think it as about range. It's like a Lighthouse is maybe 70 or 80% of your user. It's like with if you do only Lighthouse, you cover a big part of user that have like a very fast Wi-Fi, a good device, and a great, like, I don't know, they live in a city where 4G works. But as soon you go, I don't know, anywhere in the world where you maybe have a very slow 3G and your phone is like a cheap phone, that's where you still can do some kind of like you can kind of like fake it with Lighthouse to reduce the performance and reduce the latency, and kind of like making sure that this thing are calculated with the Lighthouse too. RAM is kind of like the completely truth. It's kind of like you are giving a talk to 3-4 people, and all these 3-4 people, they love it. You give the same talk to 100 people, but only 60% really understood you. So what happened is Lighthouse, it's a good test that actually what you wrote, your code is good quality, and it is most of the time is enough. But if you want to take it to the next level, and you want to kind of like really make sure that when that the user are every single user has the best performance, that's where you take data from that.
Okay,
so the point is like you're just going from like, I know 80% of my user or most of my user are a great experience, to I know that every user for sure has the best experience.
Okay, so I think I'm following now. So we're talking, if I go back to like my scientific classes, right, in training, I think like, okay, that's what we're talking about in terms of lab data, right? We're talking, I've got this set things that I'm going to run against my stuff that I know that I'm tossing at it, right, and testing. And that's what you're saying, kind of like the Lighthouse mode is doing that, right? And then, but what I really want to do is that field data, which is just, I don't have control over that whole thing, but I need to measure that. So I want to get it out to the world, get it out to all these different potentials, and then collect that data and read that and trying to understand from that how we can make the best possible performance.
And the best thing is with the field data, you can even get more accurate of which one is the device that the device at the location that your website has a poor experience. And that you can maybe make the lab data that look more that device, so you can test it better for that situation. It's very interesting. I mean, it's definitely you don't do for your blog, this kind of like fancy stuff, but it's interesting when you have a website that is used by millions and billions of users, and you want to make sure that each one, especially if you're going to mobile first, and you want that your website is highly performant for mobile devices, because we know for a fact that most of people like actually enjoy internet when they are doing like commuting or they are on the train, and definitely waiting too long for a website. There are many studies that said that if you wait more than a second, you are switching idea. You say, okay, the website is taking too long. Let me check Twitter, and the person actually never come back. So the point is like how we can get in a world where we give a great experience, not only for desktop, that we cannot have we can say that we almost win with that. We can give a decent experience in desktop. How we can give it in a situation that you are on your phone and your phone is in a bad network connection.
Rob Wormel actually gave a really interesting talk on Google Shopping and first impressions and things like that on the same topic. And it was, getting to first meaningful paint and what that meant for like sales conversions. And basically measuring the statistics that you're talking about and running two different, parallel websites that it flips a coin which one you go to. And you can study the statistics off the one that like paints faster and the one that doesn't.
Yeah, and the website company like Etsy or Pinterest, they all are some of the best case scenario where they kind of like show how just improving 30% the first contentful paint increase thought percentage of user conversion, and everyone is happier. But yeah, it's very interesting. So I want to share some website to give more concept to what's going on the how we got to this point.
Perfect. All right. Before we do that, let's say hi to Bonnie, who just joined us. Bonnie Brennan, how's it going?
Bonnie!
I'm in Paris, you guys. And I probably look crazy because I just got back from the catacombs and I was like trying to rush through traffic in Paris to get back.
Bonsoir.
So, huh?
He said bonsoir.
I know. I was going crazy because I really wanted Leonardo to come on and talk to us about perfume, and then the date he picked was the date I was gone, and I was just like, I didn't want to miss that episode.
But you're here. You made it.
But I didn't.
Oh.
I made it. Hello.
Ciao, Bonnie.
All right. Ready to share your screen?
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. So can everyone see this?
No. We still see you.
Okay.
That's a pretty cool window you got behind you.
I know, right? Where are you?
Yeah.
My office.
Ooh, fancy.
This is the view you have every day. How do you get any work done?
I don't look outside.
I would imagine that the view doesn't change very much. So
So I guess
buildings tend not to move very much. It's just my experience.
Sharing the screen.
Yeah, we see it now.
User-centric performance metrics.
Okay, so what we talked till now, we have to always remember that there is a committee that is working on a draft, and many different type of draft. And this draft, they are kind of like describing what the web can offer us as like official API to calculate this information. For example, like here we have like performance.mark, maybe you heard before, and is a very nice way to measure performance inside your website from point A to point B. And yeah, there are the committee is kind of like it's focused to kind of like define open source standards that people like me can focus on to write libraries, or even the Chrome team that is part of this committee is actually focused to iterate on these metrics. So if you go to, I always advise everyone to go to developers.google.com, where there is tons of great content. And in particular, the content related to user-centered performance metrics, where step by step, they kind of like show what we were talking about before, like the focus on try to kind of like collect these metrics, and what the 4 different types of like moments during the page. Because when you load the page, you have, is it happening, is it useful, is it usable, is delightful, and it kind of like goes on and on to describing what these metrics means and how they are for. And yeah, I totally advise everyone to kind of like at least give it a read, because they go more deep into the information that I shared before. And to continue to the topic of like, so we understood what field data, so what lab data are. We said the Lighthouse, it's focused on kind of like calculating your metrics on your laptop. The next step is, so the Chrome team started releasing different type of like polyfill to calculate the first contentful paint and to calculate the first input delay. So the first contentful paint, to calculate on your laptop, you can actually, I think the easier way is we go to, what is it? Okay. So, nope. Okay, this one. So this piece of code is all you need to calculate the first contentful paint on your website. So Performance Observer is actually an API that you can use on Chrome. It partially works on other browser. Chrome is the one that fully support like the entry type paint. And that means with this entry type paint, we can focus on retrieving in an async way the first contentful paint on your application. What I did is building on top of that a library called Perfume. And Perfume, the focus is making sure that we use like the latest API and the latest polyfill. I say polyfill because some API, like for example, to calculate the first input delay, they don't exist yet. And actually, let me stop sharing.
Can it really be a polyfill if it doesn't exist?
So the point is like the Chrome team is trying to helping you to start collecting this data from today, and there is already a good job with first contentful paint that you can use it on Chrome, but on Firefox I think it doesn't work yet, and in other browser it works but not as kind of like reliable as Chrome. So they're trying to give you like option. It's like, okay, you can do first contentful paint with like the native version, and first input delay, there is not a native version yet. So they give you like a small, like, I don't know, few bytes, very small file or polyfill that you can use to calculate from today the first input delay. So what I did, I kind of like take all these ingredients, mix it together, and make Perfume. And the reason I made this Perfume is mostly I started for my own to kind of like, okay, there is some edge cases like on Firefox doesn't work, and when it doesn't work, I don't want the website to freeze. Or kind of like, I want to make sure that the data that are accurate, they are not mixed with data that are not accurate. Or another thing is, the native API doesn't calculate well if you change tabs. Like if you load the page and you change tab and you go back to your original tab after 3 days, the metric says that you wait 3 days. Is it clear?
That's a long time.
So the point is, like, I wrote this library to kind of like prevent this situation. Like if you change tab, I stop calculating metrics because cannot be accurate. So you don't need to have, because remember, when you calculate information across all the user, doesn't matter you have 100% of user. Matter that you have an estimation of all the user when the metrics is accurate. So if a user it comes back like 3 times on your website, but you have only one estimation, it's still a good estimation. Okay.
So is this something that's designed to have in our applications no matter what for every user, or is there like a performance concern of the performance metrics that we should have this send it to a subset of users or something like that, or is
that's a reason we don't calculate TTI anymore. One of the reasons we don't calculate TTI is also because there is a lot of like calculation that needs to happen when the page loads to kind of like observe a bunch of stuff. Like you're observing all the long tasks, and when the long tasks are done, you know that the TTIs actually happen. And all this observation, they kind of like take some time, and you don't want this extra effort. So every time we talk about first contentful paint or first input delay, the cost is nothing. So you take in all these metrics, and another extra thing that I did on Perfume is the measurement. It might cost you like a fraction of a millisecond, but if you want to send this metric to Google Analytics, and usually sending this metrics to Analytics takes between 1 and 2 milliseconds, and you're doing a lot of measurement, and you want to really be picky or don't waste even that 1 or 2 milliseconds, I wrote inside Perfume, I used inside Perfume request idle callback. And request idle callback make sure that you calculate when you need to calculate, but you send it only when the thread is empty. Kind of like to be very picky. Okay, an image that will clarify more about it. So let me share again. Okay, let's see if I can share it. Okay, can you see this image?
Yes.
Okay, so this it's a small recap of what we talk about it. So we have the main thread from the moment you load the page till the page is finished to load, and you have three metrics: first contentful paint, FCP, TTI, time to interactive, and FID, first input delay. So the first contentful paint is the one that as soon as you navigate, you have the first kind of like content to be loaded. You have more stuff happening, and the user decides to do like there is a browser receives first input, this click. So you do a click, and this kind of like moment that you wait, that is the first input delay. And the TTI, it's when all the red things, so these are all the tasks, are actually completed. So these are the three that after this AngularAir, you should remember: first contentful paint, TTI, and first input delay.
How is that first input delay measured?
So let's do an example. Like I'm refreshing this page, and the first input delay, the first contentful paint is 1 second. So here you see 0 second, okay, 0 millisecond. As soon as I click, you can see this changing to 2. So the way it's being calculated is first input delay. Let's see the polyfill. Where is it? What is it? GitHub. Here we go. So this is the polyfill of first input delay. And if you see the source code, it's very trivial. What it does, it just like adds an add event listener to few specific iteration, like clicking or tapping. It just like listen this. If you say that, let's say this is the polyfill. It's pretty short, and these are the event type that we are looking through: click, mouse down, key down, touch start, and pointer down. And as soon one of those happen, it start measuring, and when the thread is empty, is free again, it stop measuring. So what I did, I took this polyfill and I just kind of like put it inside Perfume. And I did it because with Perfume, you can just like instantiate Perfume, tell Perfume what metrics you want. If you want first paint, if you want first contentful paint, or if you want first input delay. And for free, without knowing much about it, you can have the metrics related. And you can use this thing on your website. So done that, you want to actually upload it to Google Analytics. So by just saying to Google Analytics, like Google Analytics enable true, you have automatically all this information uploaded to Google Analytics. And if you don't use Google Analytics, but you want to add it to your custom, I don't know, if you use Amplitude or you use any sort of like mixed panel or your own custom like metric system, well, you just kind of like use the analytics tracker that every time there is a metric, you can just like feed your own analytics with the metrics that is being collected. Stop sharing. There we go. Sweet.
Cool. That's really cool. So I guess I'm trying to wrap my head a little bit more around the first input delay. And thinking about like, so as soon as somebody does one of those interactions, touch, click, that sort of thing, like that's when that's going to start calculating it. And then when it responds, it finishes it off. Is that kind of going to be dependent on when they click? Like if they click before the first meaningful paint, or if they click after, would that number vary?
It is a very, and that's a reason for a developer, for engineer, it's important to optimize for all of this.
Hey, Leonardo, you still have your screen sharing on.
Yeah, that's happened sometime.
There we go.
There you are.
Here we go. But yes, that's happened sometime. And I think what matters most is like you try to optimize for all cases. because sometimes the result is like 50 milliseconds, other it's 250, and the worst scenario, you try to optimize for the worst case. Because what you want the boot up time of your application be really fast.
Cool. Yeah, because I'm just kind of trying to process, like, okay, well, how do I use that measurement to identify what I need to do, right, to solve it? Or
because think about first contentful paint, it's focused mostly on the bundle size. It's like, okay, if you reduce the bundle size, first contentful paint, it's be reduced too, because you take less time to actually load everything. First input delay is more focused on the JavaScript part. Like, some people do the mistake to kind of like overload the boot up time with a lot of like
video backgrounds.
Yeah.
Video backgrounds?
Yeah.
Is that the early 2000s thing?
I was like, people are doing that?
No, it's all the time now. Like, you see these websites that are so slow, and there's these huge content pieces that are dependent on them.
But yeah, the trick is making sure that it's kind of like it's telling you more about your story. It's telling you like you are spending much time to, I don't know, initializing many stores. Maybe you should initialize it all at the same time. Maybe you want to initialize some store only when the that pages is loaded. So instead, if you have like 100 pages and each page has its own individual store, you lazy load the store of your Redux or MobX or whatever is the technology you're using. You're initializing only when the page is loaded, instead of having like a global store that initializes it all at once.
Now, with Angular, is that going to also affect your meaningful paint as well? Like, if Angular has to do all of its JavaScript, run up and build up before it gets to rendering a component, which would give you that paint, right? How does that come into play?
Well, the first meaningful paint, the point is we might be smart enough that you actually load everything, you print the content, but you still have like 2 seconds or 1.5 seconds of JavaScript that you just set them out. They just need to set them out. So do this after. But the after, it still has to do it. It's I don't know if one of you saw like Airbnb did a case study 2 years ago where the first paint was really fast, and you can see the home page. But every time the user was going to click the autocomplete, it wasn't working. Wasn't working because there were a bunch of stuff loading in the background and took another extra 1 second or 2 seconds to load. So that's what we are talking about with the first input delay. Making sure that, yes, you're seeing the application, and that's the first contentful paint. And yes, it's responsive right away, and that is first input delay. For Angular, doesn't change much. The focus of this metrics, it covers very well all your application. I mean, with Ivy, actually, we're gonna have like a boot up time faster anyway for free.
So this is where stuff like Universal kind of starts coming into the picture, right? As well, for a solution.
Universal is perfect for first input, for the first contentful paint, but you still have the first input delay to work around. One extra thing I want to talk about the Angular part is so everything I talk about it's pretty much what the Chrome team is evangelizing to everyone, making sure you do your homework, making sure you measure your metrics, and making sure that you understand where you stand on the quality of your application. And can I share the screen again? Okay.
No, the first time is free. After that, you have to pay $5 each time.
We take Venmo or PayPal.
I think that's me.
Okay, so everything that I just said, you can find it on the website. You can just type perfumejs.com, and that will go to my GitHub pages related to Perfume. And with Perfume, you can download it. You can start using to calculate your first paint, first contentful paint, the first input delay. The next step is actually start calculating your components. So this is something that I'm start doing it, and that's where part of, I will say, the one part of the story that people don't talk about it much, but and we should kind of like at least acknowledge that might be a problem, is when you know that you are taking too much time to calculate the first input delay, or your performance are slow, but you don't quite understand when and who is causing that. So I started writing this Angular version where this decorator named Perfume after view init. And what actually does is you can decorate any component you want in your Angular application. You can decorate any component, and what it does, it just calculates how long it takes from the constructor to the paint on the browser of that specific component. And that will show in your dev tools. So actually, let's do live. Let's see if it works.
Is that just in dev tools, or can you send that off to some other analytics?
You can send to other analytics. So for example, like if I refresh this and it's reloading everything, DevTools is stopping, and you say, okay, so let's see. Oh, these are this application is very small, but I can see like, okay, the app component, the constructor started here, and this is where there was the view init. This intro component, CVP component, and navigation component. And it's also very interesting how they depend from each other, and see where actually you see the life cycle, the Angular life cycle, how is initialized, and for the after view init for each individual component.
Okay, let's pause there really quick, because I think this is really valuable and awesome, right? That we're seeing here with these measurements for these individual components, but we're also seeing other stuff, right? Like we see like which component got initialized first, then the flow of it, right? In that waterfall kind of effect. And wow, this is really cool.
I mean, we know the run microtask is Angular that is doing a bunch of like, okay, this is creating an element. And it's like, okay, but what component is creating an element? And you always kind of like wonder of who is doing what. And it's much more crazier when, for example, this application, it's been minified. So I don't know much about what component it is after it gets minified. So we have the name because simply I'm just adding the name here. So if you remove the name from the decorator, you will still get the metrics, but I don't know, the name will change based on what the Angular engine decide to change the name. So as Perfume does, all this information, they will automatically goes to the analytics tracker and spit out to wherever you want. Like, yeah. And you can get more fancy. We have more debugging tools that you can decide, like, if you want in like logging out or not. Like, for example, if you on debugging, you want kind of like see this thing happening. So if I refresh, you will see, okay, intro component took 10 milliseconds, 7 milliseconds, or you just don't want them, you can just disable them. So the library trying to give you some option of how you want to kind of like configure these metrics.
And then can you dive in there a little further and be able to say, like, I want to wrap some timing code around some services that I call within my component to identify if those are the ones that are actually the part that's slowing down this part?
Yes, because the point is, everything started with me doing perfume.start. Perfume.start is what actually I showed it in the beginning here. So if you, even right now, you do like performance.mark, this is an open API that everyone can use in every browser. And what you do, you just try to say, start measuring these metrics now and stop it now. And when you do this, you get a specific amount of millisecond due for that metric. what I converted is just like an easy way that when you do it in Perfume, automatically gets uploaded in your metrics. So you can use the decorator for components, or you can use perfume.start. And Perfume, by the way, is just like easily injected as a service. And the way it works is the service is initialized only once, because we just do it as a library, as in the initial ng module. And the reason it needs to be initialized only once is because anytime you initialize Perfume, you will create a new store. Like Perfume is gonna kind of like making sure that there are different, every metrics you measure, there is a start and there is an end. And that's the reason you need only one instance, because Perfume is kind of like just doing some homework for you. And yes, what you said is right. We can start doing like specific like services, like, okay, start now in these components, and few components after, or few services after, do an end.
And you said, just to remind us again, how many milliseconds was unacceptable or
Well,
not optimal?
Stop the screen sharing. Okay. Sweet. So just remember, okay, that's we go back to the story of the e-commerce.
You're still screen sharing.
Damn it. That's I have to pay $5. So,
Oh,
okay.
God.
I told you he was funny, you guys.
So remember that everything that is more than a second, it's bad.
A second is bad. Okay.
So a second is bad because research proved that every time you on a website takes more than a second to the page to anything to change, your content switching. So you are like, if something takes more than a second, you are already thinking about something else, and you might gonna easily leave the website to like, okay, let me check Twitter, let me check Facebook, let me check Slack. So a second is kind of like really bad.
Okay.
300 millisecond is the perception of things going slower.
Okay.
Everything that is more than 300 milliseconds, and that's very interesting for popover, models. Every time you do a click and something happen, if happen for more after 300 milliseconds, feels slower.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If you can get there under 100 millisecond, it perceived like instantaneous.
Okay.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time to do this fix.
So I'm assuming you would take Perfume out of your app for production, because it's just for like making sure it's ready for production, but you don't want to leave these calls in there?
That's the thing. That's we go back to the beginning of the conversation. You leave Perfume inside the application for field data to calculate this information across all your users. And you do Lighthouse before deploying. And it is important that you don't abuse of the components decorator. You make sure that the component decorator is used only for big components. Like if you're measuring something that is 3 milliseconds, it's not really worth the measurement. You're measuring like a date picker. You're measuring something that is more like a composition of many components. And something that maybe happened to me in the past is like you have a model that is 100 milliseconds, and inside this model you decide to do autocomplete. And you take another library, and this autocomplete it's just not rated as performant as you thought. And this autocomplete has another 100 milliseconds of junk that you didn't expect it. So you see your model going from super performant 75 millisecond thing to 180 or 200. You didn't notice that. I mean, it's so minimal, so small, the change, that you will maybe notice after 20 days. And you're like, why it feels slower? And the reality is Perfume, if you measure the component over weeks, you cannot see your I don't know, your main components going like, okay, now it's 100 millisecond, 110, 90, and it's fine. And after it goes from 100 to 300, like, okay, something happened. And you go to your commit, you realize that you commit that code, and that code needs to be reverted or improved. So see as the RAM, the real user metrics, the field data, as an alert system for something that maybe user didn't realize that, but you are preventing before it gets actually a problem.
Yeah, I think that's, I'm a big fan of this because of that fact. Like when you have an issue in your application and your users are telling you it's slow or it locks up on me, and you ask them when and where and what they were doing, like, good luck with that, right? It's very difficult. And then to try and troubleshoot that, and you get the pressure of everybody, all your users, everybody's on the app, wants that fixed, and now you're on the clock for fixing that. You know, you have this measurement stuff in place. It's going to help you track down those problems and figure out where that's at, and how to get your solution out there to market faster. It's very handy to have.
Yeah, my advice is definitely like use Perfume in your most important components, the components that maybe rely to third-party application or rely to some very complex Redux operation or MapReduce, something that maybe even though I don't know, you open the model only when the database give you back some information. I mean, it can be anything, but at least you start measuring, and you know that, you know, when you're working on your own application, maybe your database is only 10 megabytes, and every call, it's really fast because it's very small, the kilobyte that you download. When you go to production, you go about gigabytes or terabytes, and things that the payload is a little bit bigger, and your component is not performant as you thought. So that's where real user metrics give you the feelings of like what is really happening. The easy comparison is between unit testing and functional testing. You need both. Functional testing is just making sure completes the picture. You still need unit testing, and functional testing is just making sure that functional testing doesn't know exactly where is the problem, but knows that there is a problem somewhere. The same, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. I like it. That sinks home. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, we're at the top of the hour, so we better wrap things up. Anything last that you want to add to that discussion?
Thank you for listening. I can talk for forever, and
well,
I know it's not is a topic that there is a lot of like new buzzwords, and not many people talk about it, so it can be kind of confusing in the beginning. So if there is anything that is not clear, just bug me on Twitter, or you can find me in San Francisco to the local meetup. And I just want to mention again, we are organizing the Angular Rome conference in October next year. We're still early in the organization. We're going to open the call for paper in January. And yeah, I'm always on it.
Leonardo, NG China is in October of next year. And I really want to go to both. So maybe make sure you're not at the same time as NG China.
NG Rome is October 7, 2018.
Okay. Okay, that should be fine. And I also want to say, so I have used Perfume a little bit, and I really like it. And I know you can do some of this stuff on your own, but Perfume is just so easy to use. But if you fire it up and it's not working, before you email Leonardo to complain that it doesn't work, make sure all your versions are consistent. Because I had updated, I think I got the latest version, because Perfume works with the latest version of Angular, but my Angular, I think my CLI and then my Angular didn't match. And so, so once I got all that working, Perfume was great and it worked just fine. So there was, so make sure your versions match before you bug Leonardo. Not that you would ever do that.
I will try to reply right away.
But I really do like, I mean, it's so convenient and it's quick and I like it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Let's do some picks. Anybody have any picks? Raise your hand and I'll call. All right. Austin, raise your hand first. You're on.
I feel like I haven't had a pick in a while. I actually have two. So there is this new thing I saw on Twitter called DevHub, and it's essentially like TweetDeck, but for GitHub. So if you don't have enough notifications in your life and you just want more, you can get this. And there's also this tool, this package I've been using lately called TextMask. And like everyone wants their freaking like currency like formatted as you type it in, right? And that's kind of a pain in the butt. And so this package actually is really awesome. Bonnie,
Sorry, Austin.
you totally knocked me off what I was saying. Oh, this package is like really awesome. You can use it, which is vanilla JS or vanilla JavaScript, or it has like add-ons for Vue and Angular and React and all that type of stuff. It also has like add-ons. So like if someone types like a bad date, it'll like recorrect it automatically. Super awesome. Highly recommend. That's my picks.
Nice. I think we should have an episode on text masks and in Angular and the whole concept.
Oh yeah, I'm using it. Yeah. Next week, Austin, be ready.
So anybody who wants to be a guest that present that content, hit us up. Let me know. We can do an episode on it.
I'll make sure to skip that one.
All right. Who else has picks? Bonnie, did I see your hand? All right.
Yes. So you guys know how proud I am of my little child component. And she was on the show just a few weeks ago talking about her Angular for the visual learner. And she did her keynote at NGBE was just last week. And it is now on YouTube. So that's my pick. So Angular for the visual learner with Samantha Brennan from NGBE. It was really an amazing talk.
Awesome. Great pick. Okay. Alyssa, do you have something?
Yeah, so it's kind of personal pick day. Today is our 8th anniversary, me and my husband. So shout out to anybody who is in the vicinity of coming up on an anniversary because, woo!
And Zach, shout out to Zach. We love you, Zach.
Even though he loves Ember, we love him.
I'm gonna go eat cake to celebrate. Can I eat cake?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Alyssa, at least he doesn't use CoffeeScript.
But he's the one that got me into CoffeeScript, Austin.
It could be worse.
Are you sure you're with the right person?
8 years, yes. You're on your way.
Justin, I heard that dig there.
And just to clarify, I'm not snarking React. I'm snarking my friend Austin.
All right. Leonardo, do you have any picks for us?
Yeah. Sorry. So I want to pick idle until urgent.
You want to pick what?
It's an article. It's called idle until urgent. And it's my favorite way to improve your performance in the last few weeks. It's a way of how you should use request idle callback to kind of like delay an operation that is not important that you do now, but you still want to do it. And instead of doing now, you just said, I want to do this operation when the thread is empty again. And it's a great article that pretty much says, just delay whatever you're doing when the thread is empty. And it's great. It's a very useful if you want to like boost your performance on boot up time or any time. Yeah, just read it. It's great. And if you have a question, tweet the guy that wrote it.
And if you click on it, it loads instantly, or at least I perceive it as loading instantly.
And the guy that wrote it, by the way, is the guy that also wrote the polyfill for the first input delay. So he definitely knows what he's talking about.
Idle until urgent.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Awesome. All right, Leonardo. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right, everyone. Have a good one. We're out. Later.